So we'll be deploying our MERN project, our MongoDB Express React Node project. A site service called Heroku. There's a couple of these, and you may find other services you like even more. In fact, I've been looking at one called Netlify that many alumni have been using to deploy, and it's awesome. So Heroku is what we're going to show you, just so you can see the process. But if you go to a site like Netlify and use their process, they'll have the whole process written out for you, or you can follow a tutorial. It'll be pretty similar. In fact, other sites may have you do even less to get it deployed, but this will be good because we get to kind of see the process. Yeah.
We're supposed to be on the master branch. What will do?
It won't actually. It won't matter what branch you're on. You just want to make sure the master branch on GitHub is up to date. Actually, you want this code to be in the master branch. So you're going to want to do this on a branch, like make a new branch called the deploy branch, because we're going to have to push this new code up, merge it into the master, so the master has all the deployment code on it as well. There's just like 7 or 8 lines of code we have to add to make this work. So whoever is doing it, branch off of your working master, call it like the deploy branch. That's where we'll be adding all this, so we can still push that up and do the pull request. Now, I don't have a repository yet, and I need that for this to follow. So you have to make sure your group project, if it's inside of your assignments directory, that's not going to work. It has to be its own repository, which it should be from this whole process. But if it's not, make sure it is its own repository. Mine is not. As we can see, there's no indication here that user auth part 1 is a repository or any of the other directories. I need this to be a repository. I don't want one of the outer folders to be one. We only want to deploy this code.
Question. Does that mean that final project also has to be on its own?
Does what need to be?
Final project.
Yes, your personal project will be as well. I'm going to make a new repository, call it test deploy, because it's just my test deploy. I'll delete later. I'm going to create the repository and connect it locally. Git commit. This is so cool. -M. And that's when I hit backspace. So is it going to go back now? Nice. I love it. You get to watch this forever if you watch the video. So, okay, git commit -M with a. I'll call this initial commit because this is my first. Make sure node modules are going up. Great. And push. Oh, don't do this to me now. Okay, I'm going to do a HTTPS. Okay, so now I have my repository. As soon as this updates, there we go. We're good to go. So I'm going to make my branch, git branch, deploy branch, and git checkout to deploy branch. And we'll get going. All right, Heroku is an excellent service that specializes in making deployment of your web applications quick and painless. Fortunately for us, it also has the free tier, which will be perfect for our needs. Now, you will need to create an account on Heroku, so we'll do that in a moment. And for the MongoDB service, the online database service, you will have to give them a card of some sort, credit card, debit card. They don't charge it. It's just in case later if you expand your service and want more features, just to create that account, they require it. So the very first thing we need to do is not locally. We need to go to Heroku.com, create our username and password, and then create an application. It'll be a shell of an application, basically an empty application, but we're going to say for this application, use this repository's master branch for all the code so it knows what to deploy. I'm going to go to Heroku.com. And I'm going to log in because I already have a username and password. But if you haven't, create an account. Oh, come on now. Fill out when they clear the form. There we go. Third time's the charm. There's my portfolio site posted on here. So when you get onto Heroku, you're taken to this dashboard area where yours will be empty right now because you don't have any applications. But any applications that you do deploy will start showing up here as their own tab. So I could come into here and then I get all these different settings for my current application. So I can change its settings. I can change how it deploys. I can install different resources like databases. That's where we'll be doing this. And then the general overview, the history of when it was deployed, when things have been updated. This is matching the Git history of the repository it's tied to. So I just need to go back to personal here, and we need to create a new app. So you'll click up here on new, and you'll say create new app, and then you need to give your app a name. This is the URL for your app. It's whatever you type here is going to end in .herokuapp.com when it's deployed. So I'm going to call this test deploy app. It's not available. How about this test deploy app? That works. And I'm not going to change anything else. I'm just going to say create app. And now when I go to personal, I'll see mine that's existed and the new one I just created. So I can come into here now to configure this application. Any questions up to this point? Heroku is nice. It's pretty straightforward. So once you create your free Heroku account, create a free account, we now need to download and install the Heroku CLI. Does anyone know what CLI stands for? Command line? Interface. Like Node. Node has its own command line interface because in the command line, we can interact with Node by saying commands like Node. Git has its own command line interface. So we can say words like Git. So other languages, other packages will also have their own command lines that as soon as you install it, I can say something like Heroku and then call a command. It's going to run the Heroku command that I've installed. So we need to install that command line. And we need to log into our Heroku account locally. So we're going to visit the Heroku CLI download page and download the installer for macOS. When it's done, we'll open it up. We get all this. We double check the right up here. You can also use the brew install if you want. They will have the same end result. But if you'd rather just type this command, which I think I'm actually going to do because we all have homebrew, I'm just going to Control-C that, and then, or Command-C and then Command-V here, brew tap Heroku /brew and brew install Heroku. Yep, this is like when we installed Node. You never have to do it again. Yep. So we'll install Heroku CLI.
So you use this for static sites as well?
You can, but it's just so much easier with Surge. This is a lot of overkill for a static site. This is best because it lets you host a server. And we're going to have our server serve up our web page. So really, we're hosting our server, which serves up our site. We'll have to create one online using an extension called MongoLab. Yeah, see, if you have a website that requires data locally, let's say like the e-commerce store or the pizza website, something that data needs to be there for it to work, there is a section at the end of this write-up that shows you how to upload your local database to the Heroku database. So it's definitely possible you won't have to recreate it, but let's just get everything working first and then we'll go from there. It's taken a moment, of course. Okay. I'm assuming yours are still installing, or is everyone's done? Ah, everyone's done. Okay, mine was slow. So now we can type in Heroku commands, and we need to tie our local to Heroku's remote. So we're going to say Heroku login and hit enter. Oh, sweet. And they make it so you don't have to even enter it here anymore. You just hit a key to open up the browser. It will take you to Heroku. You'll click login, and now you're logged in. Wonderful. Let me know if that doesn't work for you. You can close that Heroku window once it's logged in. You should see your email here that you've logged in under.
It doesn't go back to your, it's like your computer user. I mean, it's still downloaded.
Yeah, if it hasn't come back to like this, yeah, it's still installing Brew. Yeah, mine was going for quite a while. Then just run Heroku login, hit a button, go to the window and click login. And we'll be logged in locally to Heroku. Hey, look, we're already 2 steps in. Step 3, ensure you have or create a Git repository for this project. Cool, we get to skip step 3. Step 4. So now we'll be on step 4. Everyone logged in locally that's following along? Okay. Step 4, okay, so there's a few different ways to deploy a site. And there's an article here if you want to read more about it, but the 3 main options you have is you can have Express and React files sit on the same machine with all the React files inside of a specific client folder, and Express will be doing double duty. It will be serving up our React site to whoever's visiting our site while also serving as our API for the Mongoose requests. This is the version that we're following because none of the sites we're creating needs these separate pieces. There's not enough data really happening to have a necessity for it, but you can host them separately. You can put your server on one site, your front end on another, and have them communicate, or you can put them behind a proxy. Because we don't do either of these, we're not going to go into detail on them, because this would need to maybe have Amazon Web Services, and this would maybe need an NGINX web server. So we're going to keep them together. So we don't have to change anything. We already have a client folder. So this is where you'd have to move files around as necessary to match this directory setup, but this is the directory setup we've been using for development. So we're done with that as well. We should have a client folder. So if we're matching it here, we need client, models, routes, and server to all be on the same level, which they are. And then inside of routes, we have these and our models. And then inside of client, we have public and source, which we do. If you weren't using Create React App, you'd be building this entire structure yourself, including the public and the source folders. Great, so we get to skip that. All this is just talking about what we're already doing. Also, make sure to run your app to test it before to make sure it's working, but we didn't have to move anything, so we're fine. All right, so here's where we get to add some code. This is where we get our Express app to serve up our React app. There's a few lines of code we need to add, and they're all right here for us. So you'll be on your server.js file, and you'll need to copy over the following. First, we need to require a module called path, and that can just be right up here with our other requires. So it's kind of interesting, right? I didn't have to npm install path. This is because Node comes with a lot of pre-built Node modules that you can use by requiring them. Path is one of those, and what it does is it resolves pathways. So let's find if we can find a good explanation. npm path. Well, that's descriptive. That's not descriptive at all. Aye. Aye, aye. These are all the pre-built node modules inside of Node, so there is quite a few. But here's path. So the path module provides utilities for working with file and directory paths that can be accessed by using, requiring path. And so it helps you say something like this. You can say use path and then say look in this directory or this path to find the file. And it works well with your local operating system to resolve paths and find files and directories and stuff that you're using in your application. So we just needed to use this module for the next line of code. And then we're going to copy in this line right here. App.use express.static path.join dir name client build. And this is going to be one of those middlewares for every request. So we're putting it right here. As this says here, Express Static is in charge of sending static file requests to the client. So when the browser requests an image or your logo, something like that from your site, it knows to look in the build folder for that. We'll get to what the build folder is shortly, but basically it's going to be your ready to deploy application. It's the pure JavaScript HTML after all of this has been bundled and turned into a browser readable code. All right, then right before your app.listen, we're going to add this line, app.get to star. I'll scroll down above the app.listen and paste this in. This is a catch-all route handler. It needs to be near the bottom of your server file so that it will only be enacted if the API routes above it don't handle the request. It's in charge of sending the main index HTML file back to the client if it didn't receive a request that recognized otherwise. So when we send requests to our API, usually it's like this. If none of these endpoints match, it's like, oh, they're requesting the homepage. This is like when they're first visiting the site. And this actually is what's going to send our entire React app to the client, whoever's accessing it. So this is where our server is really powering the game. And it's using the path module as well to send the entire build, index HTML file.
Is this basically a server hosting our server?
It's a server hosting our website. Yeah. Our server is going to be hosting our site. It's going to send it all in one go. That's the magic of single page applications using a framework is you don't, every time you go to a new page on your website, you're not asking your server for another page. When you hit the home page, it sends the entire site to your browser, and then you're using React Router to route around that site, but it's all in your browser as soon as they hit your home page. Which is pretty cool. All right, next step, add a proxy to the client's package JSON. We've done this. This is how we develop. In case you haven't, I don't know how you made it this far if you haven't, but if you haven't, you'll want to add that in. This will say, you know, any request to just / means to go to our own server. And here's a little snippet of how it should look. And this is more explanation of what we just said. Setting up environment variables. Now, your group full stack project may not have had an environment variable. But if it did, we'll need to account for it. What is the one main environment variable we've introduced for backend? Okay, those are valid answers. The secret. Port, we never create it. That's what Heroku will give us eventually, but we do create a secret if you've done user auth. So we have this .env with the secret. Now, Heroku won't know about this, so we need to tell it what its secret should be when our app is stored live. So on the Heroku website, I am on my app right now. To add environment variables to this app, I have to go to Settings and click Reveal Config Vars. And here I can give key value pairs for environment variables that Heroku will keep secret so our user authentication still works. So I'll keep the key the same. I'll say secret. And then I'll choose 4 different words for this value. It shouldn't match my local one. So how about yellow, Friday, mayo, ocean. Yes, and I'll add it. So if you're using third-party APIs that also have API keys that you have to use, you can put them in here. You'd actually have to for like the React _ app _ API key. You'd have to add it in here just like that, React _ app _ API key, and then put in the value. I don't have any of those there, so all I'm going to add is secret. That is my only environment variable. It shouldn't, yeah. This is the one, because once this is hosted, when users visit your site, they're not hitting your server, they're hitting your server hosted on Heroku. So Heroku is going to use its own secret to encode the tokens and validate requests. And this is the one they're going to use. Now I wouldn't use this either because I'm going to put this video on YouTube and this is not secure. I'm going to pull down this app pretty quick. Hey, okay. So this goes into a long talk about environment variables, but what you really need is this because we've already done everything else locally, right? We've done const port equals whatever Heroku's using, or if it's locally, use ours, and then we're using our port variable in our server listen. So that's all we really needed. Then this talks about implementing those variables, which is just more on this, which again, we're already doing. Hey, we love skipping large segments of our write-up. Don't feel like you need to do this. We're already doing this through when we say process.env.secret. It's telling us to install .env. We've done that. So we are already over halfway through the write-up. And just to make sure we haven't got lost in the process, what have we done so far? We've created a Heroku account. We created a Heroku app. We installed the Heroku CLI, and we logged into Heroku locally. Once we did that, we added the path module, the express static middleware, and the catch-all route handler. Wonderful.
Do you still see it in the dependencies if you know what do you see if you have the Heroku?
So Heroku is a global software configuration like Node. So you never see Node dependencies because it's like you installed Photoshop. It's just on your computer. Anything can use it. Yeah. But it's specifically for the command line.
So you won't be able to check it and go somewhere and check if your computer already has it?
Yeah, you can, you should be able to, for anything you install with Brew, you can say Heroku-V to get the version number of Heroku you have installed. If I said Node-V, if it doesn't give me a version number, that means it's not installed and I need to reinstall it. Okay. Next piece, setting up MongoLab. So this is the part that they're going to ask you for your credit card. Money grabbing faves. No, we need a MongoLab is a plugin for Heroku, and it's just a MongoDB database hosted on a cloud or on a server, remote server. So we need to use the Heroku CLI one more time to create this add-on to add it to this application we're making. So the command is right here, but you need to say, I'd copy all of this and then name of your Heroku app, including the brackets. All this needs to be replaced with the name of your Heroku app. So I'll just type this out. Heroku add-ons : create MongoLab -a, and then the name of my app. Test deploy up. Test deploy up. And I'll hit enter. It's creating the MongoLab. And then I'll get this created MongoLab clean or something here as MongoDB URI. Use Heroku add-on stock MongoLab to view documentation. So if you get this, you now have a database connected to your Heroku app. Where do we see that on Heroku? If you go to resources, you'll now see MongoLab as a resource. Now the write-up, I believe, says you should get a message like the one above, creating the database. Oh, wait. Okay, so when you run this command, you're probably going to get an error if anyone just tried it. So I missed a step right up here. When you go to Heroku.com, you need to go to Account Settings, Billing, and add a credit card, and then run this command and it will work. So I'll go to here, Account Settings, Billing, and actually I don't want this on YouTube. Oh, my credit card's on there. So we're just gonna pull this off the screen, go back a level. You don't need to know my last four or anything about it. I'm so glad that took a second to load. Yeah, that was quick. We're gonna have to start all over. Okay, so take a second, add those numbers, create that database. We'll keep going. But you notice it does say when you go to resources, it's free. But you can modify your plan to not be free.
Sorry, you go to where your cost equals.
Yes. So here, if I go large, like right now I get these little icons. This is settings. If I open up, I'll go to settings, reveal config bars. And I added secret, this one, but notice when I created the Mongo lab, it created a environment variable for me, the MongoDB URI. That connects them to the cloud database, so the remote server hosted database that we just enabled. So you don't need to add this. This should happen automatically. You shouldn't touch it or change it.
Now on your server.js, you do a cost equals, cost secret equals.
I don't. I just do it directly inline like this. You can save it in a variable if you'd like first. You could say something like const secret equals process.env.secret. And then here I could just say secret. That's all that part of the write-up is saying. But, you know, that's an extra line for now. This is small enough, I just kind of leave that out. Either or.
This is a web cloud hosting server. Kind of Amazon Web Services kind of another. Is this?
Yep, exactly. We're NGINX servers as well.
If you put your information in, do you have to rerun that and look for add-ons on all that?
Go to your application and check the configuration variables or your resources. If you see this in here, you don't need to reinstall the Mongo lab. It's already installed for your application. But if you did that command before you entered in your card information, then more than likely it did not get added, and you'll want to run that command again, which is Heroku add-ons : create Mongo lab -a, and then the name of your app. So you get something that looks like this as a response, which we see here. All right, but we need to tell Mongoose to connect to this database. If that environment variable exists, we want to connect to the Mongo lab, not to our local host. So our Mongoose connect needs an OR statement here. If process.env.mongodb URI exists, use that database. If it doesn't, then use my local host. So right here, my Mongoose connect, I'm going to add process.env.mongodb _URI or my local host setting. That way I can still run this locally for development and refactoring, but when it's online, it'll be using the MongoDB connection to MongoLab. Yeah? And this is just reminding you, when you do the MongoLab command to create your MongoDB database, this environment variables are automatically created by Mongo or by Heroku, right? It's already in here. So I don't need to add this. I just need my code to reference it when it's remote. Okay, add a git ignore to your main project. We done did that. Here's some other things you can add to it: DS store, orig, idea, VS Code. Do you know what a dot file is? I think we've talked about it, but what is the purpose of a dot file? which is a file that starts with a dot, like .env or .getignore. Configuration. So we're going to add to our .getignore more things to ignore. DS store is something specific to Mac. It's like folder settings. Every folder gets one, so might as well not push that up. VS Code also gets its own settings. And I'm not sure what IDEA is or .orig, but or this is when GitHub has some issues and you'll have some like orig files show up. So good things to ignore, but the absolute most necessary are those first two, node modules and .env. All right, moving right along. Yell stop or wait if I'm going too fast. We needed to tell Heroku to run a script for us. Now, when you talk about build for this process, when we have our front end, can the browser read a React component? If I just opened up like an app.js file and I wrote a React component in there, what would happen when I try to put that with an index.html file? It would crash. The browser can't read this code. So what is doing our bundling process? What is turning all this code into browser readable code? Webpack. Webpack takes all this code from React, throws it through a bundling process, and outputs a folder called build, which is just the plain HTML, CSS, and JavaScript representation of our app, that the browser can read it. Well, we're going to tell Heroku that once it gets our code to run the build process before it deploys it, so that that folder shows up, the build folder, and then our server, it will be able to serve that build folder that the browser can read, and it will have an index.html file that references all of our JavaScript as script tags, just like day one. The way that we do this is in our package.json of the, let's see, I believe it's of the server side. Yeah, in the server's package.json in the scripts, we need to add this Heroku post build script. So I'm going to copy it all, and then I'll close the client folder so I don't accidentally do this. I'll go to the server side's package.json, go in the scripts, and paste in the Heroku post build command. And Heroku is going to run this when it needs to, but notice what it does. It CDs into your client folder, it runs npm install to install dependencies, and then it runs the build process. So Heroku is going to do this for us. This is the command we just have to give it to teach it how to do that. Again, that is in the server's package.json. All right, we should already have a start node server.js because node needs to be told to start our app. If you don't have this, add in the start script as well. But our package.json needs one more setting. It needs to know what version of node we're running. What environment is this whole bundling process occurring in? And more importantly, what version of that environment are you using? So we have to add one more section to our package.json on the server side called engines. So after dependencies or after scripts, either one will work. I'll type engines, object brackets, and I'll say node. And then I need to give the current version number that I'm using for node right now. How do I find that? I open up my terminal and I say node-b. And I need 10.16.0. So I'll copy that and put it there. So as long as we've got scripts start in Heroku post build and engines node, our package.json has been told everything it needs to configure this.
What does it mean if you didn't have the start line?
The start?
Yeah, I have that.
So that's like, you do have it?
No, I didn't.
And this is on your server package.json? The start is the same thing that we use on the front end when we say npm start. It runs the build process so we can see our React app. Heroku is going to run start to start up the server. But if we don't give it the command, it's going to run npm start. But if we don't tell it what to do, what that does, our server will never start. So this is just making sure that Heroku is able to start our server once it's remote.
And if it's not there, it'll try to default to index.
Yeah, and if not there, it'll try to start the index.js, but we're using a server.js, so important. And then here's like a little snapshot of a condensed package JSON after we've added all these things. The scripts, the engines, and possible dependencies. We don't use body parser anymore because we've got express.json that uses it for us. Any questions on the scripts or engines? Great. At this point, you're ready to deploy. So at this point, before we deploy, this code is ready to go. We need to add this to our master branch. So I'm going to git add all, git commit my deploy branch, and git push. Set the upstream origin, which we've probably all done this process a couple times now, so it'll be a little bit easier, but we're just making sure this branch exists on GitHub. Is this branch yet a part of the master? No, I gotta go to GitHub. So I'll go to GitHub to my repository. There's my deploy branch, parent pull request. Able to merge, great. Create pull request. And merge pull request. Now I'm not gonna delete the branch right now because if something is wrong, I'm going to keep working on this branch until deployment works, and then I'll delete it. But I am going to confirm the merge so the master is fully up to date, and now I can have Heroku try to deploy this code. So now my master should have all this, but I'm a little paranoid, so I'm going to go and check and make sure. Server, good. It has path, it has my static, has my catch-all. That's enough for me to know that my code's now part of the master. So this is the code we're going to give Heroku. So we're back on the Heroku website for pretty much the rest of this. Deploy. Right, in order for Heroku to use your Git repository as the source, you'll need to configure your GitHub account to Heroku's website. So basically, you need Heroku to have access to log into your GitHub. So I'm going to go to the deploy tab now of my app on Heroku. And there's 3 different ways to do this. You can have Heroku create its own repository for you. I'd rather just connect it right to GitHub. So I'm going to click the GitHub tab. I'm not choosing a pipeline, just GitHub. And then it may have you log into GitHub if you haven't yet. So you may not see your username here yet. You may have to log into GitHub, and then you'll see your username here, and then you need to put the name of the repository all this code lives in, which is, well, I guess I go to GitHub and see. It's called test deploy. That is the name of this repository. So I'll say the repository name is test deploy. I'll hit search. No repos found for engines. Oh, because this is vSchools. Oh no, fatal error. 1 second, I'm gonna pause the recording. Okay, so in that brief pause there, I learned that I could just choose the other account that I'm logged in with. So vSchool has this, and I'm gonna say search for test deploy in the vSchools GitHub. And I didn't find it there either. But yours should be found.
Do you have to do it through GitHub or?
You do it right here.
Do you want to
It's up to you. So once you connect your repository, you will see a screen that looks like this. And it's like, great, I found your repository. And you click connect. And it connects you to the specific master branch of that repository, or it connects it to that repository. Then you have to tell it which branch to deploy from. So this little area will show up and you choose master from it. And then there's one step left. You click deploy branch. Now, if you want to have to come to Heroku to update your deployed version, don't click enable automatic deploys. Enabling automatic deploys means when you do a pull request to your master branch, this will get redeployed. If you don't enable this, you'll have to come to Heroku and click deploy branch. I prefer that method because I catch more errors that way. Either way, go ahead and click deploy branch, and you'll see something like this running in Heroku. And this may take 2 to 5 minutes to run the full deploy process. What's that?
If you don't want it to go automatically, do you have to check the little thing above the enable, or you just want to?
Yeah, don't check the wait. Yeah, don't check that. Only click this if you want it enabled. Then just click deploy branch when you have master chosen. I'm curious on why it's not finding the vSchool. I thought it was, but no, it's Bob's account. I'm adding stuff to Bob's GitHub, so. All right, and that's it. If you click deploy on this here screen, we'll look at it one more time. Where did it go? Where did it go? You click deploy and it's doing, you see this kind of script running in your console. It'll either fail or it'll say successful, and you can click the link to see it. And then you're done. That will deploy it. You should be able to visit the URL. But a couple of things going forward. If it doesn't work, that's fine. Right after we're done with this, I'll come around and we'll debug. Updating your Heroku app, you have two options: manually clicking deploy branch on Heroku after updating master, or it's clicking the automatic. And then a couple of you will need this, exporting your local. So if you have a local database like the e-commerce store people or the pizza database people, you'll have to make a Mongo dump, which is just one of the coolest commands I've ever heard. And this will create actually like a directory in your project of your local database. And then you'll use a command called Mongo restore to send it up to Mongo Lab. And this walks you through the whole process. So I'd ask you just read this. I worked very hard with screenshots in every step of the way. But if you get stuck, just let me know. I'm happy to help. And if you want custom domains, this is where I ran out of energy. Click the link and learn more. Yeah, there's a couple things about Heroku to be aware of. So I'm going to stop the recording.